Thank you everyone for coming along to the Dawn of Freedom, Self-Liberation and the Bardos discussion. I'm Pema and you are you. So this is a little bit about me for those of you who are new. I'm the Buddhist chaplain with USQ's multi-faith service. I'm also a senior lecturer in writing, editing and publishing in my day job. I'm the co-director of Jalu Buddhist Meditation Centre, which is largely an online meditation centre. And I've been a Buddhist practitioner for about 4 decades. What's 22? I was ordained as an Akpa in 2005. An Akpa is a non-monastic minister in the Tibetan Vajrayana tradition in the Nyingma school. And I was given permission to teach in 2006, but didn't really start doing that straight off. But I have been doing that a little bit more lately. Okay, so we'll set our intentions for today. We'll just take a moment to consider why we're here. And the reason we're here is to connect with our pristine nature, the true nature of mind. So that once we are free of disturbing emotions, negative emotions, we'll be able to help others to be free as well. So I'll just read a short excerpt from the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva, an 8th century Buddhist master and monk from India. And this I find always really helps me to set my intention. May I be a guard for those without one, a guide for all who journey on the road. May I become a boat, a raft or bridge for all who wish to cross the water. May I be an isle for those desiring landfall and a lamp for those who wish for light. May I be a bed for those who need to rest and a servant for all who live in need. So today we're talking about Bardos, and these are kind of the subject headings that we're going to go over. First one is not knowing is a good thing. What is a Bardo? Why should we understand the Bardos? What exactly is the opportunity in the Bardos? And then we'll break for questions and maybe toilet break. And then in the second hour, we'll talk about the Bardo of luminosity, the natural Bardo of this life, the Bardo of meditation, the painful Bardo of dying, and then we'll talk about luminous awareness to round off, and I'll give an opportunity to ask questions again at the end. So first off the card rank, not knowing is a good thing. So in Buddhism, not knowing is not a problem. In fact, recognizing, accepting that as much we don't know is a sign of maturity, humility and intelligence. Not knowing is the beginning of learning, and that's always good. So because the Bardo topic is such a large one, and we only have 2 hours, I'm going to essentially read through a transcript of a previous teaching I did. So I make sure I cover everything and just talk to the key points as we go along. It's not the way I normally do these kinds of things. I normally just talk off the top of my head. But given we've got a limited amount of time and quite a lot of ground to cover, I'm going to do it in a slightly more formal way. Hopefully it will be okay. And obviously, don't worry if things are new to you at the outset. They'll be clear by the time we get to the end. So, as I said, not knowing is a good thing. I'd like to reassure you that I'll be explaining things simply. Any unusual words or terms will be defined in a way that is easy to understand. I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions twice, in the middle and at the end. And just as that quote on the screen says there, not knowing is not a problem. Not knowing is the beginning of learning, and that's really always a good thing. In terms of practice in particular, knowing too much can be a problem. Conceptual ideas about meditation can be a significant obstacle. That's why in our tradition, we tend to give only a little of the theory and then let each person discover the depths of meditation for themselves. Asking questions of their teachers as experiences arise that they want to understand. So as things arise for people in their meditation, they go to the teacher and they simply ask. So that approach avoids the common pitfall of people knowing a lot about meditation in terms of information and thinking they have had the lofty experiences described in the texts, or have reached the more subtle levels of meditation the teachings define, and yet are merely the victims of suggestion, in the same way that when we watch TV and we see an ad about chocolate, we suddenly want chocolate, which is suggestion. Oftentimes those with a lot of information but little practice misidentify their ordinary and common experiences as higher meditational states. This is quite a common problem. So in reality, it is actually better to not know too much at the beginning. In the Zen tradition, they call that beginner's mind, which is seen as a very positive thing. So the short text by Longchenpa that I emailed out to everyone, or someone emailed it out to you, will be used for only one part of the talk, and that's the section on dying. We'll also be covering the other bardos, though, such as dreaming, meditation, and the bardo of luminosity, which is really the important one for this particular talk. So, for those of you who do not know, what is a bardo? In Tibetan Buddhism, a bardo is an intermediate or transitional state, a liminal state between each moment, between each thought, between sleeping and waking, between gross and subtle levels of mind, between life and rebirth, between ignorance and awakening. To quote Francesca Fremantle, a long-term practitioner in Kagyu tradition, bardo can have many implications depending on how one looks at it. It is an interval, a hiatus, a gap. It can act as a boundary that divides and separates, marking the end of one thing and the beginning of another. But it can also be a link between the two. It can serve as a bridge or a meeting place, which brings together and unites. It is a crossing, a stepping stone, a transition. So in essence, that's what a bardo is. There are 6 bardos. They are living, dreaming, meditation, dying, luminosity, and becoming or rebirth. In some traditions, they talk about only 4 bardos: living, dying, luminosity, and becoming. In some, they even divide it into 8. Don't worry about that or get confused. It's not a problem. It's just evidence of the diversity of Dharma, of the different ways of thinking about and understanding the same thing. The main thing to understand is that a bardo is a mind state. It's a more subtle mind state between the grosser mind states of a dualistic mind, the compulsive thinking mind. Because the bardos are often associated with death and rebirth, they can be mistakenly understood as some place we go on the way from here, or this life, to there, the next life. This is not at all the case. The bardos are aspects or levels of mind or mind states. So the bardos go everywhere with us and are always with us. In our tradition, which is the Nyingma tradition, we talk about 2 fundamental aspects or states of mind. So this is a little bit technical, so I'll go slowly. There is first the ordinary dualistic mind, which in Tibetan we call Sen, S-E-N. And then there is the boundless, primordially perfect awareness, which in Tibetan we call Rigpa. And Rigpa is essentially Buddha nature, the essence of enlightenment that is the true nature of all sentient beings. So we have these 2, the ordinary dualistic mind, which is the cause of all of our problems and indeed is the source or the ground of samsara. And we have Rigpa, which is the true nature of mind, true nature of all things, in fact, and is essentially Buddha nature. So the bardos are the traditional mind states in between the activity of the ordinary dualistic mind. So in between one thought and another, one emotion and another, one feeling and another, one moment of perception and another. So the bardo is that gap. So each of the bardos is an opportunity for the Buddhist practitioner to recognize the true nature of mind and absolute reality. The greatest opportunity is in the bardo of dying, in which all of the constraints of the body and dualistic mind fall away, and the ultimate nature, or Rigpa, is revealed naturally, providing a profound opportunity for total liberation. To be prepared for that moment, when the constraints of the body and the dualistic mind fall away, we can take advantage of the other bardos that occur in our day-to-day lives to train in recognition of the natural state, in recognition of the true nature of the mind, or the ultimate nature. Because an understanding of the bardos can lead to total liberation in this lifetime, so it won't be deferred to some other lifetime, even if that liberation happens at the very end of this life in the dying process, these bardo teachings are considered to be among the most precious things, or most precious teachings in Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism. It goes without saying that because these bardo teachings open the door to liberation in one lifetime, we should take them seriously and put some effort into understanding them. This is again this thing about knowing things and doing. There's often a big gap between what we know in terms of what we know about Buddhism or the Dharma and what we do, how we practice. The Bardo teachings are a really stark example of if you don't apply the teachings, there's absolutely no point knowing them. They're useless without application. That's true of a lot of teachings, actually. We need to apply them in our daily lives. So, in our discussion about the Bardos, I'm going to be drawing on a fifth instruction by the great Dzogchen Master Longchenpa. That brief teaching, known as Crucial Advice, a complete set of instructions for the Bardos, focuses only on the dying process, or mainly on the dying process. We will, however, also be discussing other Bardos, as I mentioned, as they are the ones we can engage with right now while we are alive. Nevertheless, Longchenpa's fifth instructions illuminate how we can seize the opportunity of the Bardos in our everyday life. We'll also be drawing on even briefer fifth instructions from my own Heart Lama, Holiness Dujong Rinpoche, who managed to encapsulate the essence of the Bardo teachings on dying in just 6 lines. So, what exactly is the opportunity in the Bardos? The reason the Bardos are an opportunity is precisely because they are an interval, hiatus, or gap. So, what are they, a gap or break in? What are they, a hiatus or pause of? They are a break in dualistic mind, the ordinary compulsive thinking mind. They are a hiatus in the workings of the self, because the dualistic thinking mind and the self are essentially one and the same. The self is just an identification with thoughts and feelings, as though they constituted a person, a lasting separate identity, which of course they do not. A Bardo then is whatever is between moments of dualistic mind, between moments of thinking, or between the compulsive shenanigans of the self. There are many words for what is found in the gap. The ultimate or absolute nature, the natural state, Tathagata Garbha, Sugata Garbha, or the Buddha nature. These are all words for what remains beneath or beyond mentation, beyond thoughts and feelings, and our self-identification with those thoughts and feelings. We've already discussed the word we use in the Nyingma tradition of Vajrayana for what is found in the gap, in the Bardo, which is the Rigpa. Rigpa can be translated as pristine or primordial awareness. In the Dzogchen tradition, total enlightenment is defined as resting without distraction in the ultimate nature, resting permanently in the true nature of mind, or Rigpa. And that word resting is important there, because in the Dzogchen tradition, it is considered that the quickest way to reveal the true nature of mind, or to reveal Rigpa, or to awaken to enlightenment, whatever language you want to use, is to simply do nothing, to simply rest the body, rest the speech, rest the mind. And then when all of our compulsive behavior and thinking and speaking stops, the true nature is there already. So let's just take a moment to reflect on that. This is a momentous and exciting truth, that in the gap between the shenanigans of monkey mind, there is already enlightenment. The ultimate nature is already there. It does not need to be created, cultivated, or refined. It is right there, right now, closer than our own hearts, as my beloved Jamnang Temple often says. All we need to do is recognize it, which means to feel it and remain with it. Buddha nature, or enlightened mind, or the ultimate nature, or Rigpa, or whatever you want to call it, is an intrinsic part of us that we can't see because it is just too close, profoundly close. The traditional metaphor for this situation is that our true nature is like our eyes. Our eyes see everything except themselves. This is an important metaphor because it indicates that our intrinsic and pristine awareness must look at itself for the recognition to occur, for us to awaken to our perfect nature. We cannot recognize Rigpa from within the trap of self. We cannot recognize Rigpa with the dualistic mind. We must turn our intrinsic awareness on itself. And this is what we call meditation. So, the Bardos are moments in which the ultimate nature, the Buddha nature, naturally manifests without effort, without meditation, in fact. The Bardo teachings give us the ability to recognize that nature as those interval moments unfold. This is what makes these teachings essential. The duration for which the Buddha nature is revealed in those interval moments is incredibly brief in all of the Bardos, except the Bardo of dying. The finger snap speed with which most of the Bardos are revealed and then obscured again by the dualistic mind is an obstacle to recognize what is happening, to seeing the true nature of mind. It just passes by like a flash. A further problem is that even though the true nature is revealed in these brief moments, we do not recognize it, as we have not fully experienced the true nature of our minds before. Thus, the opportunity to awaken to our Buddha potential passes as quickly as it came. In the Bardo of dying, the duration for which the true nature is revealed is longer. Rather than microseconds, it is perhaps minutes. This makes the Bardo of dying a supreme opportunity. As Jamgon Rinpoche states, the intermediate state between death and rebirth is an excellent time to recognize Tathagata Garbha. While we are alive, it takes some effort to experience our true nature. But during the Bardo state between death and rebirth, we experience it naturally. The only question is whether we recognize it. So we can increase our chances of recognizing the true nature of mind in these interval moments by training in that recognition. It is in our best interest to understand what we are experiencing in these Bardos and to increase the duration of them. It doesn't make sense not to try to do that. We can understand what we are experiencing in these moments through the Bardo teachings themselves. So that's a little bit of study. We can increase the duration of the Bardos, even the Bardo of dying, with the simple practice of meditation. Nothing fancier is needed. In fact, that is ultimately all we need, just a consistent meditation practice. And those of you who know me will probably be yawning at this point because I say that all the time. So we'll move on now to a moment of questions, which means we'll need to unmute you all. You can all unmute yourself. If you have any questions, just unmute yourself and ask. Donna? Sharon?
No questions for me.
No.
Sorry, who's speaking?
Oh, Sharon. Oh,
Sharon, go ahead.
Oh. No, I don't have any questions.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I do have a question.
Go for it.
Yes. So when you talk about how there's other Bardos, but they're very brief, are you sort of talking about? Oh, I'm a bit unsure, like, because I know you go into that space, and I had a bit of an experience post having done some breath work that, like, it extended for quite a long time. Like, I felt like I was, not myself at all for like, literally half an hour. I think it was something like that, which I've never experienced again or before. So I just wasn't sure whether. And then if you do happen to be in the Bardo, so you take that opportunity to recognize your primordial self, but like there's nothing you really have to do while you're there, though.
Okay, so the first thing is meditation experience in which the self falls away. Those are good, obviously, but they're not exactly the same thing. Well, I'm not saying they're not exactly. They're good, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you've recognized the nature of mind in that moment. So we have moments of non-thought, moments of stillness, moments when our sense of ourself drops away, but there's still a very subtle clinging. So there's still a sense of being located somewhere. But that is like the threshold of what we call a gateway experience to the mind of clear light. So those are very good experiences, and the thing to do when they happen is to just relax. and
Right.
just do nothing in essence. Just observe the mind, what it's doing. Because the other thing is, when I mentioned earlier that when you know too much about meditation, like you know all the levels of meditation, you know all the pieces and all of that, it's very easy to trick oneself into thinking that one is experiencing those things. Especially because some of these mind states that are not beneficial at all are similar in their outer characteristics to some mind states that are very quite profound. So for example, the state of non-thought in itself is not particularly beneficial, but when you recognize the nature of mind, there is also in attendance periods of non-thought. So it's tricky, and that's why we don't sort of necessarily want to give away the ghost, I suppose.
No, it's like you said, like remain a beginner almost, like a beginner mind.
Yeah, it's
where
very important.
You just,
but
because that's
mind states where you do lose thought or thought drops away and the sense of self drops away, those are good. So they're good.
Okay. All right.
Anyone else have questions? No? All right. So does anyone want to have a break to have a drink of water or go to the toilet or anything like that? No?
Can you hear me? This is Susan.
I can hear you, Susan.
Oh, okay. That's amazing.
Go ahead.
Just to sort of question or confirming what you said. So it's a feeling like being in meditation. There's nothing in particular you have to do to feel or to know that you're in the Bardo. It's just...
Okay, so in the next section, I'm going to talk about specific moments in our day-to-day life where these Bardos emerge naturally, right? So, and there is a way of identifying them, and we'll go over that in a minute. But the key sign of the Bardo is that there's an experience of luminosity. That's the key one, and that means that there's a sense of there can be non-thought, but there's a sense of luminosity. There's a sense of vast spaciousness, and a sense of, and there's a warmth, a compassionate love that rises naturally. But the Bardos that appear naturally in our day-to-day lives, they literally like flick in and out so fast that we do not notice them, because our focus is not on the true nature of our mind. Our focus is on our dualistic thinking. So when we talk about ourselves, we're just talking about a process of self-identification with thoughts and feelings and emotions that are triggered by external stuff, and memories of experiences and stuff are considered to be external stuff, external to the true nature of the mind. So what we call ourselves is a small, separate, flimsy, like not particularly special thing. Our true nature is actually vast, unbound, limitless, and permeated by compassion. But because our focus is fully on that self-identification with thoughts, emotions, and feelings, we never experience or rarely experience that other aspect of our nature, the primordial awareness, what we call Rigpa. But there are moments in life when they just happen despite ourselves. And I'll go over those in a minute. And maybe now's a good time to move on. Any other questions? Anyone? Susan, did that answer your question or just confuse you more?
No, that was good. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. All right, so we'll just roll on, I think, onto the Bardo of luminosity. These are gifts, these little pretty pictures. They're supposed to move, but they're not moving, which is sad to me. Okay, so because there is nothing more important than achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, like literally, there is nothing more important than that. I'll focus now on the Bardo through which enlightenment in this very life is actually possible, and that's the Bardo of luminosity. This Bardo is interesting because it appears throughout our lives and also when we're dying. There's a reason for that, which we'll cover in a minute. So if you remember the other 5 Bardos from the beginning of this talk, they are living, which is the period between being born and dying, obviously. They are dreaming, meditation, dying, and becoming. And becoming is the process of being reborn, where the processes of what we call the self are triggered into another entity. So the Bardo of luminosity actually appears in all of those Bardos except the Bardo of becoming. So it doesn't appear in that Bardo of rebirth or reincarnation. So if you don't believe in rebirth, then we don't have a problem here, because we can still talk about the Bardo of luminosity in the context of living, dreaming, meditation, and dying. So you don't really need to believe in rebirth or karma or any of those things actually to get benefit from the teachings on the Bardos. So what is this luminosity that we're talking about here? In Dzogchen, now I'll just define that word for those of you who've not heard it before or who are unfamiliar with it. Dzogchen is a style of practice, a lineage of practice, and a tradition in Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism. It is also a word that refers to the natural state. So when one abides in the true nature of mind, or one abides or rests in Rigpa, it's said that one is in the state of Dzogchen. And Dzogchen translates as the great perfection or the great completion. Dzog means perfect or complete, perfectly complete, and Chen means great. So Dzogchen, the great perfection or the great completion. So in Dzogchen, the fundamental nature of everything, including our minds, is called the ground luminosity or mother luminosity. This luminosity pervades our whole experience, although we do not recognize or notice it. It is obscured by dualistic thinking and feeling, or to be more precise, actually, it is obscured by our focus on and self-identification with thoughts and feelings. For those who have recognized the true nature of mind and are resting in Rigpa, this luminosity dawns as an actual experience of light, or rather, an experience of vast spaciousness pervaded by light. For those of us still trapped in our self-identification with dualistic mind, this luminosity is masked as mental activity. So that's important. The luminosity is still there, but we experience it as something other than luminosity. We experience it as mental activity. That is, it is the inherent nature or ground of the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that arise in the dualistic mind. So the luminosity is actually what's behind all that ordinary mentation, and actually is their true nature, is the true nature of thought, feeling, and emotion. So in the moment of death, the ground luminosity, true nature of mind, if you want to call it that, the Buddha nature, if you want to call it that, Rigpa, if you want to call it that, dawns naturally, unmasked, providing an opportunity for total liberation, but only if the dying person has learned how to recognize it. If, as while we're alive, we don't learn how to recognize ground luminosity or Rigpa or the true nature of mind or Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it, it will simply pass by as another experience, and we'll just continue on propelled by our habitual tendencies, our habitual minds, which is called karma, and then be reborn into another existence of suffering. So in our everyday life, there are many opportunities for training in that recognition, moments in which the ground luminosity also dawns naturally. And so at this point, we'll move on to a discussion about those, and they are contained within a discussion of the natural bardo of this life. So just before we go any further, I just want to make it clear that this way of thinking about the bardo of luminosity is not exactly traditional. Those things are on the screen are totally traditional though. Just my emphasis on the bardo of luminosity over the others is a little bit unique to me. It's based on the teachings I've received, definitely, but mostly on my own understanding and experience. So that's why it's a little bit idiosyncratic. That being said, the Bardo teachings are already diverse. Remember, we have the idea that there are 4, the idea that there are 6, the idea that there are 8. And there's already more than one way to think about Bardos, and the Bardo teachings themselves note that each individual's experience of the transitional states, so our experience, each of our experience of the Bardos will be different based on things like our social and cultural conditioning, our compulsive habits, and our karma. So already we know, already in the Bardo teachings, there's an openness to understanding this in a multitude of ways. There's some basic structure that's important. There are some key moments that are important not to ignore. But in terms of the things that we experience as we go through the Bardos, those are often quite unique to us as individuals with some similarities, some universalities in some senses. In this Bardo we call life, which is between our last existence and our next one. There are a number of gateways to the Bardo of luminosity and to the Buddha nature or Rupa. Certain subtler levels of mind or Bardo manifest during uncontrolled processes such as fainting, going to sleep, ending a dream, experiencing orgasm, sneezing, and being startled. In each of these experiences, the dualistic mind stutters to a halt for a moment, and the mind of clear light or Rupa is revealed. The pause or gap is usually mere microseconds, but even so, those gaps provide a way to enter the Bardo of luminosity, to recognize the nature of mind. As these gateways are opportunities, does that mean we should pursue them? The last two, sneezing and being startled, are totally out of our control. Fainting is also usually out of our control and is unpleasant and risky. And as someone who's a chronic fainter, because I have vasovagal syncope, it really is unpleasant. It's not a good idea to take up fainting or sneezing as a spiritual practice, definitely not. Although in India, it certainly has been done. Most of us have little or no control over dreaming either, but we can certainly get some control, but it takes a great deal of effort and practice over many years, and that's called, lucid dreaming. Perhaps that is certainly worth pursuing if we have time, energy, and inclination. So pursuing some control in our dreams. In Vajrayana, the practice associated with the Bardo of dreaming, with using sleep and dreams to recognize the true nature of mind, is called dream yoga. Dream yoga comes with some risks, namely ongoing sleep deprivation, as it requires the practitioner to not fall deeply asleep. It involves sometimes complex visualizations that can take a long time to perfect, and also sleep postures that feel unnatural to many. Obviously, there's no fainting yoga, sneezing yoga, or getting the bejesus scared out of us yoga in Buddhism. There is, however, a yoga associated with the subtle mind states provoked by orgasm. This is called Kama Mudra or bliss yoga. This also takes a great deal of effort and practice over many years. Most of us have too much attachment to pleasure for it to be effective. Bliss yoga only works for those with deep renunciation, with no desire for or attachment to pleasure, with no attachment to the self, in fact. For those of us who are still attracted to pleasure, this practice of Kama Mudra can become a trap. It can lead to a reinforcement of the ego rather than the dissolution of it, because it's focusing on something that is inherently risky, on pleasure and attachment. That being said, it is a powerful practice for those able to do it. The practice aims at prolonging orgasm so that the resultant gap when the dualistic mind stutters to a halt in the wake of the bliss is equally long, providing an opportunity to shine awareness on itself. The focus of Kama Mudra practice is not the orgasm itself, but the stillness of mind afterwards. It also involves sometimes complex visualizations that can take years to perfect and physical restraint that can be quite physically uncomfortable. It is also somewhat masculinist and heterosexist. It is designed for male practitioners more than female ones, and for opposite sex rather than same-sex relationships. So also, it's important to note that bliss yoga and dream yoga are only effective with a solid foundation of hundreds of hours of meditation. They just will not work otherwise. Which brings me neatly to the next Bardo, that of meditation. Meditation is a gateway to the Bardo of luminosity and to the mind of clear light or Rigpa. As some of you will have heard me say hundreds of times by now, meditation is the surest way to recognize the true nature of mind. It is also the only practice shared by all forms of Buddhism, from Sutra and Mahayana to Tantra and Dzogchen. Though it does also require some effort, it does not involve complex visualizations or other taxing postures or restraint. It is also much quicker to accomplish. Longchenpa, the founder of my lineage, said that calm abiding can be accomplished in a mere 3 months of consistent and diligent practice in a retreat setting, that is. So meditation is not just the foundation of the practice, it is the fundamental core of it. In meditation, we uncover increasingly subtle mind states, leading eventually to Rigpa, so these subtle Bardos. And remember, Rigpa is the true nature of mind, the primordial awareness that is not different to the Buddha mind. The true nature of mind is boundless, beyond the limiting concepts of self and other, here and there, now and then. It has only one significant quality, which is bodhicitta, and I'll define bodhicitta for you if you don't know what it is. It's essentially the awakened mind, which is non-dual wisdom and limitless compassion co-emergent. So those two things intimately tied together. They're not actually two sides of the same coin even, they're closer even than that. They're completely non-dual, wisdom and compassion. And we can break wisdom and compassion down to wisdom is the non-dual realization of the vast spacious profundity that is emptiness. And compassion is the realization of profound interconnectedness of all beings that awakens unconditional love for all. So meditation not only uncovers these subtle mind states, it extends the duration of these states when they emerge naturally, which improves the likelihood of recognizing Rigpa, when gateway moments occur. So when those things we talked about occur, fainting, sneezing, orgasm, dreaming, etc. Or when we're startled. Meditation slows down and then stops the activity of the dualistic mind, giving us the much needed space to recognize our true nature. With that spaciousness of mind, with those extended Bardos, we'll be able to place our awareness on the gap, which is actually placing our awareness on itself, because there is nothing else in the gap. It's important not to chase these experiences. Instead, we just do our regular meditation practice and allow them to unfold naturally. When they do, we just place our awareness on itself in a relaxed way with no expectations. This is a much more user-friendly way of using those gateways leading to the Bardo of luminosity than the tantric methods of dream yoga and Kama Mudra. Just allowing our meditation to naturally transform our everyday experience and awaken us to the moments of non-dual awareness or Rigpa that emerge when we dream, when we orgasm, when we fall asleep, even when we sneeze or are startled. On a psychological level, meditation helps us to overcome our disabling emotions, our anger and fear. Importantly, it also helps us to overcome our fear of death, because meditation releases our clinging to self, our existential terror at the demise of the ego. This brings us to the painful Bardo of dying. Oopsie. So for this Bardo, we'll be relying on the teaching that I sent out by Longchenpa, which is called Crucial Advice, a complete set of instructions for the Bardos. So this one really focuses wholly and solely on dying, but it also points to luminosity quite persistently throughout. So if you have that in front of you, that'd be really great, but I will actually read through it and go over it a little bit as we proceed. So at the beginning there, it starts in the same way that all Tibetan Buddhist teachings start, which is an homage to the Lama. At the feet of the sacred master, respectfully, I pay homage. Now look, it's good not to just run over that sentence as though it doesn't matter, because in fact, it's really important. In this age of distrust of authority, and in which those with authority, particularly in the spiritual space, have certainly abused that authority, some of us are understandably cautious and suspicious even of handing over our autonomy to another being. This sentence here alludes to a very important practice in Tibetan Buddhism, which is called Guru Yoga. In the West, Guru Yoga has really been misunderstood, and it's led to a lot of trouble and drama. So in the West, for some reason, and some so-called lamas have taken advantage of this misunderstanding. In the West, Guru Yoga has been approached as a sort of like do whatever the teacher says kind of trip. Oh, and just to make clear, a guru is a fully accomplished being, if not fully accomplished, fully trained and qualified. And they've been empowered, is the word we use, to teach. So, and there are different levels of teacher, obviously. So there's someone like me who's basically just a regular schmuck who just shares to the level that I can with my peers. Someone like me cannot be a guru, should not be the object of this kind of homage. This kind of homage is for those who are fully awakened, so for the Buddha and those who have followed after the Buddha have achieved enlightenment. Now, the reason it's important is because that act of surrender to wisdom, so ultimately the guru is just wisdom and compassion. That's it. There's no person there. So that first statement is simply saying, I surrender and open myself to wisdom and compassion. I allow myself to be a conduit for unbiased love. It's really simple, but in the West, it's much understood, this idea of the master. Okay, we'll move on from there. This next stanza says, although you have gained this life of freedom and advantage, it will not last. So keep in mind these instructions for the moment of death. This is a bold statement about impermanence. We will all die. It is a great tragedy, but it is an unavoidable truth. Everything is impermanent. Each thought rises like a wave, peaks and dissolves of its own accord like a wave. Every emotion we have rises and falls and disappears into where? Every feeling we have goes. Every relationship we have ends in some way. Everything we own, we will lose, break, let go of. You know, everything is impermanent. It's really important. This first to recognize that and really feel it. So that first stanza is just pointing to impermanence, and particularly the impermanence of the body. Death is unavoidable. So there's no point pretending that it doesn't happen. Now this next stanza is really quite important. So I have put it up on the screen. Now, during this intermediate period of the Bardo of this life, decide with complete certainty that the wisdom of your own awareness is Dharmakaya. I'll define Dharmakaya in a minute. And sustaining the ongoing experience of its self-radiance, the meditation which is naturally clear. Everything will only enhance naturally arising wisdom. So in that one stanza, it's kind of pointing to everything I've been saying so far, that the Bardos are gaps in dualistic mind that reveal the true nature of mind. Dharmakaya is simply another word for Buddha nature, Rigpa, true nature of mind, ultimate nature, absolute nature. It's also used, it's used in two different ways. It's also used to refer to the subtlest manifestation of an enlightened being. That's not how it's being used here. So kaya means body. So this is like the subtlest manifestation of an enlightened being, which is the Dharma body, which means essentially a body of pure light or space, a body of space. So, but that's not what's being referred to here. What's being referred to here is that your own awareness is non-dual. So our own ordinary awareness, nothing fancy we have to make, nothing fancy we have to find, nothing we have to refine or cultivate or create. Our own ordinary awareness, exactly as it is right now, is Dharmakaya, which is one with everything. So it's saying our own ordinary awareness is the absolute nature of all. That's what that word Dharmakaya is referring to there. It's referring to the absolute nature of all. The absolute and pristine and perfect nature of all, just to be really emphatic. And then he goes on, and sustaining the ongoing experience of its self-radiance, the meditation which is naturally clear. So what that is referring to is meditation that is focused on recognizing the true nature of mind, on recognizing Rigpa and resting in Rigpa, which is what is meant by naturally clear. So what Longchenpa is saying here is that in order to really be certain that one's own awareness is non-dual with the absolute or ultimate or perfect nature of all, is to meditate, recognize the nature of mind, and rest in that state, and then luminosity will dawn. Naturally clear is implying that luminosity. And then it says everything will only enhance naturally arising wisdom. This is like a profound and fundamental Dzogchen kind of statement, which means that when you're resting in that state, when you're resting in the true nature of mind, whatever arises in the mind, any thought, any feeling and emotion. So this is an important point. A fully enlightened being still has thoughts, emotions, etc., but they rise like wisps of smoke and then vanish almost instantly. They self-liberate. Nothing has to be done with them because there's no fuel in them. So then he's saying that everything that arises will just enhance one's awareness of Rigpa. Everything that one experiences will just increase one's enlightenment. Not that enlightenment can technically be increased, but you get my point. So then this goes on. If you haven't, I might actually stop sharing this and screen share this teaching, so that those of you who don't have this in front of you can see what I'm reading. So you should be able to see it now. We're down to this next bit. During the Bardo of dying, when the four elements dissolve, there will be the illusory experiences of rising and falling, shaking and haziness. So this next bit, I've got a table excerpted from another teaching by Jeffrey Hopkins and a Rinpoche teacher. It is a very good, I'll show it to you in a minute actually, that is a very good sort of succinct summary of what goes on as we die, okay? So I'll read through this and then pause to talk about what one experiences as one dies. And the reason for understanding this is so that we know what to do when it's happening to us. So during the Bardo of dying, when the four elements dissolve, he's talking about water, air, earth, and fire. So in Asian traditions, it's considered that everything is, made up of those four elements. And those four elements are also connected to, so earth, water, fire, wind, and space, also are connected to our senses. So when he's saying that these elements are dissolving and we're experiencing this rising and falling, shaking and haziness, these are kind of like experiences one feels as one's dying. So you don't need to really worry about these. The most important thing, as he goes on to say later, is to just recognize that whatever occurs as we're dying is a manifestation of the mind. It's just a manifestation of the mind. So it's nothing to worry about. It's nothing to be fearful of. It's also nothing to hang on to. So then it says the sense faculties too will cease to function, and they stop in a particular order. So first sight goes, and then other things go, and the last thing to go is taste. So as they fall away, so it's traditionally it's said that as the elements dissolve, the associated sense, perception sense dissolves as well. So sight and then smell and hearing and taste, these all dissolve as well. So this is all, something that is your direct experience as you die. So first you'll be unable to see, then you'll lose things like your hearing, and then your sense of smell will go, and then your ability to taste will go, and then your ability to feel your body goes last. So, and what Longchenpa is suggesting that we do at this point is just say, what is death? Who is dying? Where does dying take place? Now, obviously this is an ideal situation because most people, when they're dying, might not have the presence of mind to do this process, but that's okay because I've got a cheat sheet. So there's a much simpler way to deal with this situation. But these examinations are good to do while we're alive, to ask what is death, who is dying, where does dying take place? And this, of course, links to this Buddhist idea of emptiness. So if you're new, emptiness essentially means that all things are deeply interconnected and impermanent. If you look for a separate single thing, you won't find it. It'll just break down into parts to the point where you get to atoms, and then to the point where you get to space, which means it's got no inherent existence in and of itself. It depends on all other things to exist. If you take out one part, it no longer exists as it is. So this is just getting you to see that death is empty too. That it's not an entity to be fearful of or to grasp onto as being like a permanent, real existing thing. So I might share with you now. So this little teaching here is really good in terms of it gives you the death process in a very short teaching, because usually the first time I received Bardo teachings, it went for over a week, every day, with teachings every day and practice. So, and that was considered to be condensed. So to do it in 2 hours is kind of intense, but it's quite masterful of Longchenpa to have condensed all of the teachings on the Bardo of dying into these few pages. So I'll let you guys read this for yourselves and move now to a sort of more accessible way of looking at this stuff, which is to look at it in a sort of a table form. Which I'll just find. And I'll talk to the table because it's just actually it's the wrong one. I'll just talk to the table because it's actually easier to go through it in this way, because I think it's important to focus on what will happen so that we can think about what to do. Okay, so I've got that up. Now I'll share it. Okay, so you should all be able to see now a table. This is adapted from that book, Death, Intermediate State and Rebirth in Tibetan Buddhism. So it is not exactly the same as the one that appears in the book, so I've adapted it to make it more user-friendly in a way. So now look, it is complicated, this stuff, and we don't have time to really go over it in too much depth. So I'll send this table to you for your perusal. But what I really want to emphasize is these signs, I suppose. The stuff under factor dissolving, this is the theory. This is the Buddhist philosophy around existence, cosmology, what constitutes material things. Now you don't actually need to know that stuff to get benefit from the Bardo teachings. It's not a bad thing. Certainly it would not be a bad thing to learn that stuff. But actually what's really important is the stuff that I've bolded. As one dies, the first thing that goes is, well, you see it here in the science, the body becomes loose and there's a sense that the body is sinking under the earth. Then the limbs sort of shrink a little bit due to dehydration, there's weakness, powerlessness, and sight blurs. And then one loses one's eye sense. Sorry, I'm just have a drink of water. So one can't open or close one's eyes, and even though one's eyes may be open, there's a loss of sight. So I'm not going to really focus on these external signs because these are really for a practitioner, let's say a palliative care person or something like that, to sort of know where a person's at by looking at their skin. So the luster of the body diminishes, one's strength is consumed, right? These are not particularly helpful to those of us who want to use these Bardo teachings to actually get free, to liberate ourselves so that we can then help others. But the things that I've bolded are important. So first thing is you lose your sight. Then there are these visions. There's this, on the right-hand side there, it says mirage-like vision. Again, these can happen finger snap fast. So it's not particularly, and also because of our socio-cultural differences, our different karma, our different dispositions, our different minds, because all of this is a manifestation of mind. It's not particularly useful to obsess about what the visions or the things you see will be. You know, it's like when you close your eyes, you see bits of light, you see bits of dust or specks, you know. When the eyesight starts to fail, the mind starts to throw up things because it's used to doing that. So that's all that's happening. You're getting these mirage-like scenes that you see. They're not particularly important and they can flash by very fast. The next really important thing to note is that your hearing goes, okay? And then there can be like more sort of stuff the mind's throwing up, which is a bit of a, which on the right-hand side there, it's just like a smoke-like vision. Again, these can be so fast that, you know, literally blink if you miss it, if you could blink. So, but the important thing is to know eyesight goes first, hearing goes next, and then smell goes. And then there's this thing called spark-like vision. Now, if you've practiced meditation and you have quite solid meditation, these experiences will be prolonged. So that spark-like vision, that can be quite prolonged. So if you've meditated or if you've done some practice that works with energy in particular. So, but again, it's not really, these are just things the mind's throwing up. So it's not really important to focus on them. It's not really important to obsess about them, certainly. But we're just going to keep track of our path, you know, where we are at in the Bardo process. So you lose your smell, then you kind of know where you're at. You know that the next thing is, you can't taste anything. The next thing is there's a bit of an experience of a dull light. Even though you can't see, there's a sense of some dull light. That's important, because then the next thing that happens is really quite important. And it's described here in bold as, it's quite irritating language, clear vacuity or space. I put the space in there myself, filled with white light. So what this is a field of white. It's just a field of white. There's Buddhist tantric ideas about what this is, and the idea is that this is the, if you, like, you know, in Tibetan Buddhism, everything's divided up into male and female energies. Again, it's quite heterosexist, so, you know, it's not necessarily important to pay too much attention to this. But what they're saying here is that the male essence is sort of coming to the fore as other things fall away. I don't think that's particularly useful to think about. I think what's useful to note is that this is the flag. The clear vacuity or the white space that you experience as you process is something you will experience. It's not something to be enamored with. It's not something to be afraid of. It's just something that marks for you where you are. So because at this point, there is still a very subtle mind that's part of your dualistic mind. So there's still a perceiver here going, oh, something's white. You might not be having thoughts, but there's still a subtle sense of self that's experiencing this. Then the next thing that happens is very clear vacuity space filled with red light. Now again, Tibetan Buddhist way of thinking about this is that this is the female potency or energy or inheritance, I suppose, that every being has. So I see every being as a perfect balance of male and female, manifesting. It doesn't matter if you believe that or not, but it will happen. So then there's this red light that happens. Again, not something to be afraid of, not something to cling to, not something to pursue. We just treat all this stuff the way we treat everything that occurs in our meditation. It's just stuff that arises, and it will naturally dissolve of its own accord without us intervening. So we don't need to do anything. This all just happens as we die, and we just watch, we just observe. No need to intervene, at this point anyway. Then this one is a blackness, a darkness. Now, the interesting thing about this is that it can cause people to feel frightened because it is dark, obviously. And if they do feel frightened at this point, then it says there, as if swooning unconsciously. So that is a point where that last vestige of the person, the last part of dualistic mind, falls away. And that is what we would call, if we were not Buddhists, if we were something else, that's what we would call final death. That's final death. All right? But then this happens. Very clear vacuity or space, the mind of the clear light or luminosity arises. So now, everything to do with that dualistic mind, that person you think you are, Pema, my name, Pema, is gone. And yet, there is an awareness of this spaciousness that is luminous. So, and this here is the opportunity for total liberation. Because here there's no ordinary mind anymore. There's just the Buddha nature remaining. And it is aware of itself. So what do you do at this point? We could return to Longchenpa on page... I think it's on page 1. It's fairly simple. Yeah, and then he moves on quite quickly. So it's really quite interesting how he sort of, then he moves, on page 2 he's already talking about the Bardo becoming, which is after this. So really he's just saying, you know, on page 1, a few lines up, he says, as awareness parts from the inanimate, there is an experience of pure awareness devoid of phenomena. So that's this, the mind of the clear light, or rupa. Separated from the ordinary mind, the great primordial purity of Dharmakaya dawns. Through having recognized this here and now in training, you will be freed directly in a single instant and gain the Dharmakaya of twofold purity. So again, here they're talking about Dharmakaya as in enlightenment, Buddhahood, without a sense of the person or a sense of self. So all that is required at this point is not some fancy schmancy stuff. It's simply to recognize what this is. And that means to feel it as the true nature of mind. There's a really beautiful metaphor used to describe this moment, because still at this moment, there's a tiny, 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 subtle, gossamer thin separation between Rigpa as experienced by what we call the person and the ground luminosity. And the metaphor they use is, you know, is the mother luminosity here. So what's appearing here is the mother luminosity, and what is witnessing it is the child luminosity. And so the idea is that you are a child. I'm getting a bit emotional. You are a child reuniting with your mother. It's so beautiful. Nothing to be frightened of. And so you just embrace mother luminosity. There's all kinds of technical language for this. You know, becoming one with the mind of the guru, becoming one with Buddha, becoming one with the true nature, or whatever you want, whatever kind of language you want to use, it doesn't actually matter. All you need to know is that that separation ends there. If you simply embrace, recognize what this is, that this is the mother luminosity. It is the ground of everything, including your own mind. Sorry, I've got a bit of a dry throat. Including your own mind. So it's really, really important. This is the moment. This here is the gateway to total liberation in this lifetime, if one doesn't achieve it before one dies. So I don't think I can make it any clearer how important this moment is in the dying process. And if we have not meditated in our living life, this moment will flash by, really flash by. We'll be lucky if it's a second. You know, that would be extreme, not lucky actually. It would require practice to be a second. Otherwise it would be microseconds. So they say, according to the teachings here, that, according to the Bardo teachings, that however, this vision will last for as long as you're able to rest in Rigpa, in your meditation while you're alive. So if you could rest in Rigpa for 7 minutes, that's how long this opportunity will last. If you could rest in Rigpa permanently, then, you know, you can take your time. And many masters do take their time. This is what in Tibetan we call tukdam. When a master passes away, he or she rests in this space for, you know, days and days and days. The last person who passed away in terms of my lineage Khandro Semo Lanze Wongmo, she was the granddaughter of my Heart Lama. She stayed in this state, Tukdam, for 15 days. Really extraordinary. And in that time, the body does not decay. The body remains lifelike. And there is a sense of warmth at the heart. So if you put your hand on the heart, there's warmth there. And there's no bad smell, there's no awfulness, there's no rigidity, there's nothing. It's actually really, really inspiring to witness. And before, and actually that wasn't the most recent one. After that, there was one of my other lamas, Nakpa Kamalunda Rinpoche, his aunt, who was 80 something, passed away, and she stayed in Tukdam for 4 days. And she was really, inconspicuous. No one had any idea that she was a really profound practitioner. Usually the profound practitioners keep it secret, and then when they pass away, it becomes evident. So this is really important, this moment, and that's why meditation is so important, because it's the only way to train in recognizing the true nature of mind, the clear light, luminosity, or Rigpa. Now, as Longchenpa notes, beginning on page 2, if you miss that opportunity, if it flashes by, then you enter, oh, it doesn't say anything on the table, then you enter the Bardo of becoming and rebirth. And if you have a little teeny weeny bit of practice under your belt at that point, you can call out to your Lama, your teacher, or to the Buddha, and they, because, enlightened beings are not bound by time, space, form, matter, bodies, they're not bound. So you can call out to enlightened beings and they can intervene at that point for you if you miss that opportunity. So I'll go on to our slide again and talk about that. Excuse me while I get it up again. So this is my Lama on the screen here, Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche, who passed away in 1987. So he summarized the Bardo teachings in that one paragraph there, which is quite extraordinary. He was extraordinary on every level. So, and it says, and I'll go over this as we go through it, when the time comes for you to die, mingling awareness and the absolute expanse of luminosity remain in a state of evenness. So that's what we're talking about. When the ground luminosity or the mother luminosity dawns, our child luminosity, our awareness, our pure awareness, simply embraces the mother luminosity or merges with the mother luminosity. It's described as a child climbing into its mother's lap. It's very intimate and beautiful. Okay, so Dudjom Rinpoche is saying this is the ultimate way to do it. When you die, simply mingle your awareness and the absolute expanse of luminosity or mother luminosity, and then remain in that state of evenness. Just remain there. And of course, time doesn't matter in this at that point. When the ground luminosity or mother luminosity manifests, past, present, and future do not exist. There's what we call the fourth time, which is non-time, eternal non-time. So Dudjom Rinpoche, my beloved Lama, then says, this is the very best form of transference. Hell yeah, it is. Then he says, alternatively, if you can't do that, if you haven't practiced enough while you're alive, dissolve your mind in the form of a ball of light. So if you miss that and then you start to see visions, right? You miss that ground luminosity, then in the Bardo of becoming, you start to see stuff. Some of it scary, some of it beautiful, all kinds of manifestations start to throw themselves up after that. And those manifestations, depending on how you react to them, will draw you to your next life. Okay? So it's important that if you miss that mother luminosity and then stuff starts to flash in front of your eyes, or not your eyes, in your mind, then you visualize your mind as a little ball of light and shoot it into an image of the teacher's heart. And that is a visual trigger for simply merging with enlightenment. It's ultimately what you're doing. And by simply seeing your Lama or calling out to them because they're enlightened, this is why it's so important that your teacher be enlightened. You can't, it would just be so ludicrous to visualize someone like me and shoot your little mind into my heart. it's just insane. It will do 0, in fact, less than 0. So this is why it's so important to be very careful in choosing who your teacher is in this tradition. You know, if you're not practicing in this way, then the risks are lower. But anyway, so you can visualize your teacher and you can visualize your own mind in a little ball of light and shoot it into their heart. Now, my beloved Longchenpa, he has been taught a slightly different version of this. What he has been taught is to simply visualize his Lama's name as a glowing word. That's all. Very simple. And his Lama's name is Amtrin. So on my partner's wall is a little piece of paper printed out in black with gold writing that says Amtrin as his prep for the moment of death. So he just, when he passes away, rather than dissolve his mind into a little ball of light and then shoot it into his teacher's heart, he would just visualize the word Amtrin as shining golden light, which is very nice and very simple. If you have a Lama, you can do that. If you don't have a living Lama, it doesn't matter, because once an enlightened being passes away, they become, you know, more powerful. If you believe that stuff, which I happen to do. You can also simply visualize the Buddha and shoot your mind in the form of a little blue light or a little white light into the heart of the Buddha. This is perfectly fine. In fact, fantastic. So by developing skill in this transferic technique, that means practice. Do the visualization while you're alive in your meditation. Visualize yourself as a little ball of light shooting into your Lama's heart. Do it. It's a good idea. But if you're unable to do that, so particularly if people die suddenly, they don't have the time for this stuff, which is why my partner was given just a very simple, just the word Amtrin, his Lama's name. If you're unable to do that, you should recognize the deluded perceptions experienced in the immediate state in the Bardos as having no intrinsic reality. So really this is just to remember, and this is when my father passed away 2 weeks ago. The prayers I did, I got lots of Lamas to do prayers for him, but the prayer that I did for him was this. I simply spoke to him because when those we're close to karmically and emotionally and psychologically pass away, there is still a connection there for some time, for 49 days, really, is what they say in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And there is the idea that they can hear you or feel you, even if you're at a distance. So what I did was just said to my father, to realize that it was all a dream, like a movie. None of it was real. To just see that it had no intrinsic reality. And then this is the technique, this last sentence here, last 2 sentences here is a technique that my partner has been taught. Using devotion as the path, simply remember your teachers. Through the power of their compassion, you will definitely be liberated in a pure Buddha field. So this is a step down, though, from being able to embrace the mother luminosity. When one embraces the mother luminosity, one's completely liberated. When one uses this next technique of devotion, one is reborn, but reborn in an auspicious place, a Buddha field, or at least a higher kind of birth. So the fail-safe is to simply remember your teachers. Again, proviso here, they need to be enlightened. So any ordinary, Buddhist instructor, it's not going to cut it. You need to be sure, and it's tricky these days with so many fakes and so many people who really are very good at pretending to be enlightened, really very good at it. You need to be sure. And how can you be sure? Usually other practitioners recognize their qualities. So there is an element of trust there. But if you aren't able to give that trust, then you can use a historical being, the Buddha, Padmasambhava, who took Buddhism to Tibet. Yeshe Sogyo, first Tibetan woman to become enlightened. There are many, many, many. So you can do that. Call out to them. Have pictures in your room so you can quickly visualize them if you happen to die quickly or suddenly. We need to prepare. All right. So this is the closing. So the main thing we need to remember is that in the gap between the shenanigans of dualistic mind, there is already the ultimate nature or Buddha nature. It is already there. It does not need to be created, cultivated, or refined. It is right there, right now, closer than our own hearts. All we need to do is recognize it, feel it, and remain with it. To paraphrase Yoda, which I like to do, luminous awareness are we, not this crude matter of our bodies. If we can recognize our true nature while we are alive, then if we do not awaken as Buddhas in the Bardo of this life, we will awaken as Buddhas in the Bardo of luminosity that arises as we die. Death, then, should not be seen as fearful or awful, but as an opportunity for total liberation that will benefit ourselves and all other sentient beings. Death should not be taken lightly. Only a fool would take death lightly, nor underestimated. It is quite tricky. The process is tricky, but there is no benefit in fearing it. It is a gateway to Buddhahood, a sacred moment in every sentient being's existence. Any questions? I might turn on my camera and shock you with my luminous appearance. Okay. Any questions?
My grandpa talked about the white light when he died.
Did he come back?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. So this is the interesting thing. When people, so remember how I talked about the senses all dissolve one by one and the elements linked to those senses all dissolve one by one. It's not really important to know that stuff. I'm giving you like the shortcut stuff. All you really need to know is what's going to happen. You know, you will lose your sense of sight. You will lose your sense of hearing. You will lose your sense of smell. You will lose your sense of taste. And then you'll be unable to feel anything at all with the body. Then there are these visions that occur, white vision first, then the red one, then there's a black one, and then there's a white one again. This is, the systems are sometimes different. Sometimes there's more of certain things that pop up. But again, this is all cultural stuff, and whatever happens in our Bardo is our Bardo, you know. But these things are universal. The white, the red, and then the ground luminosity manifests, okay? Those are the black first, white, red, ground luminosity. Those are universal. Now, you can come back up to the white vision. You can come back, you can be resuscitated. You're not completely dead. Remember I said there's still a clinging little tiny bit, gossamer thin bit of self there. So you can be brought back from that point. So when people come back after they've been clinically dead for a while, they go, oh, I saw a white light. You know, that's true. They did. They saw, that's what they saw. You know, but then beyond that, there's more. Very few people come back and say they saw the red, because really once the white light dissolves, there's no way really of coming back. Very, very unusual. And then the ground luminosity dawns, and there's absolutely no way of coming back from there. So when they talk about, you know, but in some religions they talk about going into the white light. This is a mistake, because that's grasping. And what we want is to remain, you know, just observing, like we're in meditation. It rises, it'll dissipate. Wait for it to dissipate as it does without intervening. We just observe calmly, you know, relaxed, knowing where we're going. We're going to Mother Luminosity, you know. And Mother Luminosity is described as like a sky at dawn. So there's not really bright light. It's also not dark. There's a luminosity. It's a very interesting way of describing it. So yeah, so definitely people who come back from near-death experiences, they talk about the white light, but that's because they can be resuscitated up to that point. But no one has ever really been dead and come back. That's impossible. So we only have people who got to that point who are brought back. That's as far as they can go. And like other people will talk about the things that they see, you know, they don't necessarily get to the light, but they saw, you know, either beautiful things or scary, terrifying things. These are just the things that the mind throws up. And what I'm sort of emphasizing here is don't worry about all of that. Whatever happens, you just treat it like anything disturbing or pleasant that might appear in your meditation. It just happens, yeah, whatever, let it go and just wait. And then when the Mother Luminosity dawns, then embrace that. So it's a really very simple technique. Okay, any other questions? Oh, Sharon from Toowoomba. Did you have a question rather than just a statement? I talked over you there. Sorry.
Have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, just reminded. Oh, that was. Oh, anyway, yeah. I just wanted to talk about that because that's what I can relate to that experience.
Yeah. No, that's
he
real.
saw his mum and dad in that light.
Say that again.
He saw his mum and dad in that light.
Yeah, I think that's something that the mind throws up as well. Yeah.
All right.
But the important thing is to remember that what the mind throws up is what the mind throws up, because the thing that's important about the difference between Buddhism and some other traditions, right? There's no ongoing suffering. There's ultimate liberation. So if people embrace that experience as they pass away, then they don't come back. So it's important, because this is the thing, the mind can throw up things that we're very fond of, like visions of our parents. And if we go, oh, I want, this can be a problem for us. So we just observe in a detached, not cold, but we just observe gently in sort of a friendly way. And all of these things will vanish, so that vision of his parents, if he'd stayed there, would have dissolved. And then the red vision would have arose. And then finally the ground mother or mother luminosity would have arisen. So those visions that pop up, it's important not to get emotionally drawn, to get emotionally attached. Also, scary things can show. People can see quite scary stuff. And it's important not to be fearful, to just understand it's just mind, just projection of mind. And it will all pass, it will all go. And then ultimately there's liberation in the mother luminosity that happens at the end. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yeah.
No.
Sharon B.
Sharon B, go for it.
It's kind of two-part.
Yeah.
One is I've had a few experiences where I've envisaged people dying close to me.
Yep.
Didn't know it was happening and found out later, and also was quite the detail that I provided was exactly the detail that was provided to me.
Yep.
So I'm wondering that sort of connection to people, how that works in terms of how Buddhism sees that.
Yeah. Okay. So.
And also, just the second part, when someone is dying,
Yep.
and they're dying, is there a particular prayer that
Yes.
you could use over while you're sitting with them, for example?
Yes. So, number one, you're talking about premonitions.
Yeah.
I'm just making notes so I don't forget. And number two, prayers to do for people.
Mm.
So, in terms of premonitions, so according to emptiness, right, the boundaries between us and others are a fiction. According to interdependence, the boundaries between us and others are a fiction. So it is only normal that some people, not everyone, but some people are able to sometimes, and also according to emptiness, time, past, present, and the future are an illusion. They're a construct of the mind. And even quantum physics is now suggesting the same thing. Cool. Yulianto, Sinsin has just shared some stuff about near-death experiences there. That's really interesting. We'll have a look at those in a minute. So, time's empty, past is empty, present is empty, future is empty. You're empty, I'm empty. So it's only normal then that sometimes we perceive things outside of time, normal time. Because remember, there's this thing called the fourth time in Dzogchen, which is a kind of, it's hard, there is no language for it. Right? There's no way to describe it with language that would make sense. It just means that past, present, and future all abide at once, kinda, but also don't abide. So it's quite normal in that, given that we're not actually separate entities, that we would see the arising experiences of others. This is quite normal. So, however, it's not common. And it is something that one should use for the benefit of others. It is also something that when you have a solid meditation practice, does increase. It's not the reason to meditate, obviously, but like we don't, you know, we're not magicians. But it does happen naturally. When you meditate, your intuition sharpens, and sometimes you get these premonitions. This is quite normal. Sometimes they come. Now, look, traditionally it's said that the ones that come in dreams are more reliable than the ones that happen when we're awake. But I know practitioners who, and I won't name because I don't want to shame them or embarrass them, but I know practitioners who, like I have a number of practitioner friends who are quite spooky, you know, and they literally will share memories with others while they're happening. And like something happened the other day where a practitioner I know saw something as he woke, and it's often as you wake, sort of coming out of sleep, coming out of a dream. It's like moment where, remember that gateway moment where the boundaries are thin. So as he woke, he saw his nephew in very dire danger. So he immediately asked me what to do, and I said, tell them. So he did, and then it turns out that there was actually a risk and they averted it. So definitely use it as a tool to act in compassion, I think. But be aware that sometimes the dualistic mind just throws stuff up. So sometimes, yes, it'll be a legit premonition, if you believe in that stuff, you know. I don't believe in anything. But sometimes it will be just the dualistic mind throwing up something, you know. So you need to be aware that sometimes the mind just throws stuff up, and sometimes the boundaries between us are thin, and we can perceive sometimes something that's going to happen. It is something that that is a good thing, but also something that, like anything, we just let it go. We don't worry about it too much. You know, we don't. There are ways to enhance it, and if at another time you want to, we can talk. I don't teach this stuff because I'm not like a proper on a throne type guru, but there are ways to enhance it. So, and those can be taught, and I know lamas who could teach that if you wanted to do that. Now, in terms of prayers, so traditionally, Amitabha is the Buddha who protects the dying. And Amitabha has a pure realm. Remember, everything's the mind. Amitabha is an aspect of enlightened mind, which we all share. So Amitabha abides or resides in our heart. Amitabha's pure land, which is called Dzogchen, which means land of great bliss. So that's Tibetan, land of great Dzogchen, land of great bliss, is a place or an aspect of our heart mind where the consciousness can go where there are no obstacles to Dharma practice. So, you know, you can project your mind, what's left of the consciousness there, and then the ordinary being, the consciousness can practice Dharma there and become enlightened easy. It's an easy place. And all you need to do to help facilitate that is call on Amitabha with his mantra, which is Om, Ami, Dewa, Hri. So Ami is just Amitabha, Dewa is bliss, Hri means off you go, pop, pop. Hri is like projecting. And Om obviously is the Buddha mind. Om, Ami, Dewa, Hri. So you say that, and you can give that to people who you know will die and who know they will be dying. And if they feel comfortable, they can do it. I did it for my dad. I did it over his grave. So, you know, it's a useful thing. You don't even have to say it out loud. You can just say it internally or subvocally. And you can, if the person trusts you and you're with them as they die, you can just tap them on the top of their head very gently and just say Om Ami Dewa Hri, Om Ami Dewa Hri, Om Ami Dewa Hri. And it takes their attention to that point, and on the words, and that apparently it is very helpful. Any animal or bird or insect that passes away in my vicinity, I Om Ami Dewa Hriyam, quite compulsively, in fact. So, you know, and even if they look like they might survive, just in case I do it. So it's just in case, you know. So that's really helpful. Also, Tara is the swift liberator. So Tara, although Amitabha is the main one for the dying, because Tara is swift action, you can also do Tara mantra, which is Om Tara Tutara Teresa, which is easy. And obviously for the sick, you can do Orgyen Menla or Buddha medicine. There's Orgyen Menla, which is a Nyingma version of Medicine Buddha, and then there's also Medicine Buddha, which you can do. Those mantras are a bit long, so I can send them to you if you like. But also with Orgyen Menla, you actually need permission to do that one, which is not hard to get.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Cool. Any other questions?
Thanks, Pema. It's been lovely, been great.
Thank you, Susan. Susan, everyone, Susan is my mum-in-law. She's the mother of the great Jamyang Temple. Pretty amazing. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Thank you, Pema.
All right. Is that everything? We're all wound up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Yes, thank you very much. Very helpful.
I'll end the... Oh, wait. I've got to end this thing properly. Hang on. Where's the thingy-jiggy? So I just do a little dedication. In Buddhism, we always set our intention and then we dedicate the merit for the benefit of other beings. So by this effort, may all beings abide in the bliss of the great perfection. Om, 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 Om. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Wonderful teaching. Thank you.
Thank you.